Hello, today I would like to take a look at a scene from the movie Fake from 2011. So in this scene, we start out with the very first thing you see in the scene is a woman struggling against a man. Both of them are masked in shadow, but the motion is so it's the motion that really guides you to pay attention to that. But even though you're paying attention to that, the camera sort of moves away and then focuses on this man,
the Louvre,
then
Prada,
the painting,
and a half dozen other
then
museums from
another
Zurich to
man,
Tokyo.
and then just before you get this cut, you get the camera moving behind the easel, you get another glance at the man and woman struggling. So even though they aren't the direct focus of the camera is sort of swooping around, it's still very present within the scene. And after this, you can still see them struggling, even though the camera is focusing on the painting. And then the camera starts to focus and swirl around this one character, who is probably the main character. And by having the camera move around a lot and focus on all these different things, you get this sense of motion, this dynamic sense of motion, even though none of the characters are moving. And the few characters that are moving, they aren't being focused on, which is a very interesting choice. So then you have him look over, and then you get your first clear shot of the man and woman struggling, which, of course, the choice to cut to that there indicates that he is looking at them. And then, with the fade to black and the textual clues that damn painting, you assume that this is what's going through his head at this moment, the flashback. So we have who was probably the younger version of him and his mother. And this scene is very interesting, to me at least, because it's shot primarily using a reverse shot technique, which is usually reserved for dialogue. But in this case, instead of the reverse shot taking place primarily between the mother and the son, the focus of the shots go from the mother and son to the painting. And I think that's a very good choice because the painting is the focus of the scene. She isn't really talking to her son. I mean, she is, but the focus is still on the painting and her hatred of it. And then you also get some closer reaction shots to show his fascination with it. And one other thing I also appreciate about this scene, if we go back a bit, just how this shot is framed, where the painting is so much larger than either of them. It helps convey the importance of this piece of art, despite the fact that it can speak. It just gives it a very big presence within the story beyond just that sort of complements the dialogue and her hatred as well as his fascination with it, which I think is a very good way of visually conveying that fact. And even though that one shot at the end, even though she's telling him to not be fascinated with it, to not waste his time with it, she is framed so that she's on the periphery. So we see that all he's thinking about is the painting.
But
the reverse shot of him in the painting. He isn't hearing what his mother says. And then, of course, we have the cut back to adult him and the gun. And then by fading to black, we can assume that this is another flashback as the credits roll. And what's interesting about this is we don't really see his face, although I realize right now we do see the main character's face. But in this case, most of the close-ups we get are of his art supplies. We only see his face when we get this sort of glass between the camera and him. So that sort of creates the image of the viewer, seeing him through the canvas. Whereas when we're outside of the canvas, all we see are the paintbrush, the water, his hand. We never see his face unless it's through the lens of the canvas. You have the palette and his shirt, and then seeing his face through the canvas. We see his brush strokes, him dabbling with the paint. And I just find that very interesting. A series of very interesting and good choices. And I really enjoyed watching that. I think that it was a very well constructed piece of cinema.